And so the reason why we were looking at current location data is because it was being used in order to add an item to the log array using our new journal function. So if we scroll back up to where we were before, where we were looking at the journal function, we see that current location data description here. And so again, if our log is empty by the time that the journal or the log array is being rendered, then what we're going to do is add the item to it that corresponds to the description of the place where the user currently is at in the game. Now the reason why we were looking at journal is because it occurred in some of our code up above where we're at currently. So remember, we were looking at the fourth modification here. I'm going to scroll up here, and here we are. So we were looking at how journal is being used instead of adding to the log array directly. Let's go ahead and continue down and keep looking at the differences and see if there's anything that we haven't looked at yet. So here's our next difference. You see it's number 5 here. Normally in this function where we get the set of commands that are applicable to a particular location, what we've done is access the data variable, grab the current location from the session location variable, and then grab the commands within that. So this is an array within an array, but we're using the session array then in order to establish the key of the data piece that we want to use. Now that's a bit convoluted, a little bit difficult to understand even if someone's explaining it to you, but if you're looking at the code it can take even longer. So we're simplifying this, but we're also removing the need for a global variable by using the current location data function. And in this case, instead of passing description, we're passing commands. And so what we'll get in return is an array of the commands that we can use in this particular location. Again, this is easier to use and gets around the need for any global variables. Our next difference here is one that we've seen already, where an item is being added to the log array that's the description of the current location where the user is at in the game. So instead of accessing the global data variable, we're instead using the journal function and grabbing the description of the current place by using the function current location data. This next chunk of changes we've already looked at a good bit. We added the journal function, the getJournal function, the getInventory function, which we haven't looked at just yet, and I'm going to keep scrolling down here. We added the getLocationData function, which we looked at, and the currentLocationData function. And as I scroll down, we can get to the next modifications. Here we go. So we have the 8th modification here, whereas before, in our logStandardText function, which would add some text to our log array, instead of globalizing the log array and the standard text variables, we're instead using the journal function, and then we're using a new function called standard text. Now if we scroll down to the bottom here, we'll see the standard text function here. The structure is pretty similar to our previous code, except it's just been encapsulated inside of a function. So if we continue to scroll down to line up the left side with the right side here, you see that we have our standard text here, which in our original file gets globalized, but in our new file, it's just added to this standard text function, and then we take the key that gets passed to it and return the text associated with that key. So if pain gets passed as this key, we're going to return the text, ouch, that hurt. So again, the reason we were looking at this function is because it gets called in our logStandardText function. Okay, I'm going to scroll up on the left side to align the changes a little bit better here. Now if we look at our function moveTo, again, the globalized variables have been removed, and instead of accessing the data variable directly, we're using the currentLocationData function. Similar changes have been made to the pickup function, where we remove the globalized log array variable, and then use journal in order to add text to the log messages instead of accessing the log array directly. And that's it. Now this might have seemed a little bit convoluted to look at the changes this way. It may seem a little overwhelming at first, but the next time you look at it, you'll see that the structure is actually very similar to our previous example. We've just taken places where there wasn't functions wrapped around code, and we've wrapped functions around them. And then we've also used static variables instead of global variables in order to save data throughout the course